Hello, my name is Owen, and welcome to an overview of my reading journey for the month of February 2025. I'm going to go over what I read, how much I read, how I felt when I read it, perhaps, and also do a little bit of a look ahead into the month ahead of March 2025. Already 2 months down in the year. February is the shortest month, although I don't know, guys. The first 2 months of the year seem to be dragging a little bit for me. I feel like 2025 has overstayed its welcome, perhaps, and it's very early on in the year. That being said, shortest month of the year, and I will be using that as an excuse to the results of my February reading month. Going into the numbers, first of all, we read 3 books, which is an improvement in January, where we only read 2. Read 1,292 pages, a massive decrease, okay? And if we remember from my yearly goals, actually, I don't even know if I ever said this to anybody, but if I did say it, if you remember, if I didn't say it, this is new information to you. My goal for the year was to read 45 books. So we are already massively behind pace, and it is very early on in the year. So we got some work to do in the latter part of the year. I still feel confident about it. I think we can do it. I just think this month, I thought we were going to hit the ground running, but I got distracted a lot. And not just like, I just was doing other things than reading. Not necessarily that. I feel like also the things I was reading, the way I was reading them, led to not as much push as sometimes I have normally. Because we know, I've talked about in the past, like when I read all those Stormlight books in preparation for Wind and Truth, I was kind of feeling a little bit burnt out, so I bought a lot of different books and to try to rejuvenate me. We ended January finishing Carrie Soda, and we're like, this is it. Reading a short book in a different genre rejuvenated me. I feel good. February's going to be great. And it wasn't, not because I read anything bad, because I read, the 3 books that I read this month were Stoner by John Williams, which we just finished yesterday. We finished the reread of Assassin's Apprentice, and then we also finished Project Hail Mary. However, it is those 3 books as to why my reading numbers were the way they were, because Project Hail Mary and Assassin's Apprentice were both audiobooks. Which, if you know anything about me, I got a complex relationship with audiobooks. If you catch me on a bad day, I will say that they actually make a book worse. Because I don't know if I've ever read a book, or I've said this in the past, I don't know if I've ever read a book that I liked it more because it was an audiobook than if I would have been reading it in print. Like, I probably would have liked it more. But I've had cases where I'm listening to a book and I'm just not as interested. I don't feel as engaged. I don't feel as connected to the story. It takes me longer to listen to sometimes if I don't have a lot of time. That's good audiobook listening time. And then I end up dropping books that I think I would have liked had it been in print. That being said, I have listened to great audiobooks like since in my good days, right? Like Pet Sematary was a great audiobook that I enjoyed. And Assassin's Apprentice was one of the first audiobooks that I actually listened to, one of the handful of first. Like, I was really uncommon for me to ever do an audiobook. Assassin's Apprentice I read in around this time 2 years ago. It was an audiobook, and I really enjoyed it. Got me into that world. Ends up being one of my favorite trilogies of all time. I did read the 2nd and 3rd book in print after that, though. So listening to that book was kind of like a homecoming of sorts, and it felt nostalgic. The narrator, and especially the narrator, when his voice is pitched up to 3.5 times speed, that's what I remember. I tried for a little bit to listen to it. I'm like, you know what, maybe I'm just going to savor it. I'm just going to savor this 20-hour audiobook on 1 speed. And I felt like I was trudging through molasses, and I don't know how anybody can do that. I know some of you, when I've said this, have said they do listen to audiobooks on 1 speed, and I admire your patience and your tenacity. You must be doing it for the love of the game, because that is not a way to spend your life. It's just so slow. I need that 3.5 times speed. And listen, don't get me wrong. Sometimes I need to work up to it. I don't go out at the gate at 3.5 times. I gotta get used to the narrator at first. So I'll bump it up to 2. I'll start as 2 as a base. I will not go slower than 2. And every once in a while, I'll just jump it up like a 1/2 speed or a 1/4 speed until I'm at that 3.5 speed. And that's where we really get the sweet spot. And you may be thinking, and maybe you don't like audiobooks because you're listening to them at 3.5 times speed and you're just missing everything. Not true, I say. Not true, I say. If anything, I have to focus more because they're talking so fast, so I actually hear what they're saying. Perhaps my theory is weak, but it's what I do, okay? And it's how I have to do it, because some of these audiobooks, they're like Like Lonesome Dove, how long was that audiobook? 40 hours? It was a ridiculous amount. If I wasn't listening to that at 3.5 times speed, I'd still be listening to it today, okay? So don't blame me. And I enjoyed that book as well. But if I enjoyed it more in print, we don't know. But Assassin's Apprentice kind of breaks the rule. So I don't know why I'm ranting about that. Because I really, really like that audiobook. And I've listened to it through twice now. Both times, I think it holds up great. That book, it's fantastic. The only thing bad about Assassin's Apprentice is its name. Because it's really like not about him being an assassin's apprentice. That's just like a side part of his character. But I love that audiobook. That was a great highlight. And luckily in February, I did have a lot of like traveling, a lot of driving. So there was a lot of listening that I was able to do to power through that. But the problem is that was in the latter half of the month. So Project Hail Mary, Assassin's Apprentice, both audiobooks, listened to those primarily in the latter half, like the last week or so of February, which meant just like I was getting like 20 minutes in here, 20 minutes in there, and it was just slow going. But I was reading a print book at the same time. I was reading Stoner by John Williams, review coming out soon. And this is an interesting book. I was kind of, not up and down, but I would say like up and neutral on it for the majority of my read. The review will be coming out shortly. But it is a ponderous novel, perhaps. It's a little slow. It's really like it's just about the life of this guy. It's a life about William Stoner, and it's just from birth to death. And he had a fairly regular life, fairly unremarkable in some ways. It's just like exploration of his character and really just about humanity, which sounds as fast-paced as it sounds. So I struggled a bit, even though it's a short book. It's like 280 some pages. It took me the entire month to read. And there was never a moment, there was like the downhill portion where it's like it's coming to a point. It never felt like that to me. There were some beautiful moments, and I did think the ending was very strong of this book. But especially in the first half, everything like stayed interesting. I was stayed engaged in the book and in the characters, and I'll talk about this more in the review. But nothing was ever pulling me towards it. I was never like, can't wait to read about Stoner's 30s. Never happened for me. Maybe it happened for some, never happened for me, which just meant that I was kind of stuck in limbo with this book, bouncing between audiobooks where I'd get snippets of. Assassin's Apprentice, I think, is like probably like definitely one of my favorite fantasy books of all time. So I was like enjoying that, but it's audiobooks. I can't really sit down and look at it. And the one I could look at is a little bit slow-paced, nothing really drawing me to it. I thought that I'd finish this book quicker than I did. I thought I'd finish it up in like the first week and a half of February and start jumping into like my Murakami book or then to Kindred, which I want to read, but it never happened. And to make matters worse, because I was enjoying it, I probably could have finished it in the first half of the month. I got distracted by another very slow book. It is a nonfiction. It's called The Empty Space by Peter Brook. It's about theater, and it's about like acting, and it's about this guy Peter Brook, who's like he ran the Royal Shakespeare Company, famous theater director. It was kind of like basically his essays about the theater industry. Not something I would ever bore you guys with, but I find it very fascinating. But it is very reflective about the industry and goes kind of into details about his artistic process and the nature of art and all that stuff. So it also is a very slow, dry read. But I found that about the middle point of the month, and I just kind of got lost in the sauce there. And the thing about reading nonfiction, because I do like theater, and reading nonfiction about like a very prominent figure in the industry, is I kind of went down a rabbit hole, like who is this guy? What has he done? Like what do people think about his work? What do people think about his essays? Which is just a rabbit hole outside of reading. But reading got me into it, so I'll blame it, and that's why I'm talking about it. But that really just slowed it down as well. So I was like half reading that book, half reading this book, both very slow paced, and enjoying both of them overall, which is the real meaning of this, isn't it? But it really just slowed everything down to a halt. I think if I was reading, or if I attempted to read all four of the books, so Project Hail Mary, Assassin's Apprentice, Stoner, and then this Empty Space book, if I was reading them all in print or like on my Kindle or whatever, like just physical text, I think I could have read them all like finish one in this time. But I think the mixing of mediums meant that my fast-paced books were audio, which is slower, so it slows that down, and then my print books were slow-paced, just meant that everything was slow. So even though they were stacked on top of each other, in theory it should be very fast. Like you listen to one on the walk to work, you read one when you come home. Everything was just slowed down to a crawl. Not to say I'm not optimistic for the month of March. Like I said, I still think we could get that 45 book in the year total, and we don't even have to worry about that because we're still in the first quarter of the year. But I did feel like I wasn't reading a lot this month, which is not something I like to feel because I like to read. And I also started watching The West Wing. Okay, so I got distracted there as well. I got a lot of problems. But moving on to next month, I definitely have to read my Murakami book that I spent $40 on. Don't even know if I'll like it, so that might just tank my entire March if it's bad. But I have to read it because I spent a lot of money on it for no reason, because I was peer pressured by a small business owner. As happens to the best of us. And then I do want to read Kindred. I have it right here, and I've heard only spectacular things about it. I think this will be really engaging, really fun read, so I look forward to that. And then maybe we go into No Country for Old Men. And in the meanwhile, I am listening to still Royal Assassin, Book 2 of Farseer Trilogy, but I also simultaneously got a copy of it on my Kindle from the library, which means if I think the audiobook thing is not working out for me because maybe I'm not traveling as much in March, who knows? I kind of make these things up on the fly. But if I'm not, I can resort back to a print book. Although that is a long book, so it might slow everything down there. But we're not going to hypothesize how my month is going to go. We're just going to say what I always say: it's going to be great. It's going to be the best ever. And hours galore. You've never seen anybody read as much as me. And the normal facade I put on in these videos. But we're feeling good. Okay, I still like my diversity of genres. We still got a fantasy book in there with the Farseer Trilogy. I didn't even want to reread this going into the year, and yet I'm engrossed. I still think it holds up fantastically. And we're going to go from there. I want to know how your February went. Because here, it's still cold, but every once in a while we'll get like a glimpse of warm weather. And it makes me feel like I want it to be summer, so I'm getting that itch there. And sometimes I read more in the summer, which feels a little bit backwards because usually if it's cold, you should be sitting inside reading. But I just need the sunlight to like energize me. I think I'm a plant, guys. We're losing the plot a little bit. That's all I got to say, really. 3 books. Could be worse, but could be better. But how did your February go? Be sure to let me know in the comments. Do you guys like audiobooks? I bring this up all the time. I think it's like, what's the word? It's contested, okay? Some people say it's not reading. It's fine. It doesn't matter. It's reading. You can say you read a book if you listen to it. I don't care about that. But I think it's a proper debate to say, like, is it better or worse? Because even if you get a fully acted audiobook, is it the best way to absorb something? Also, what do you need to be doing? And this is another topic entirely. What do you need to be doing to listen to an audiobook? Because I think my problem with audiobooks is I need to be doing something like very minimal thinking power, like concentration wise, like driving is the perfect level for audiobooks for me. Because I can focus on something, I'm focusing on driving, focusing on the road, my ears can absorb properly. But like if I'm like typing something or I'm reading something else, if I'm doing something like manual, like labor, like at work or something like that, I can't be reading words as I'm listening to words, even if it's like nonsense or like very manual. I can't do it. So like washing dishes, perfect. Running on the treadmill, not perfect. Too much physical effort for me. My body loses its strength and its mind. Driving, it's perfect. That's just me. What about you, right? Are you really listening to the things that you're hearing? I don't know if you are. Maybe you are. Be sure to like and subscribe if you like the video. Do you want to see more like in the future? We went off the rails. But thanks for sticking around.